everyone, Helen here, and welcome back into the Campervan. Today I'm going to take you on the fifth part of Phil and I's most recent campervan trip to Scotland. But just before we get into it, just a quick thank you really, and a very heartfelt thank you to anybody who has made a donation on Ko-fi and said for Phil and I to treat ourselves to something while we're away. And so I just wanted to say that in these campervan videos, any time that you see us in a cafe having a cup of tea and a cake or a scone or something, I would be saying to Phil, oh, this treat is courtesy of, and then I would tell him somebody who had very kindly donated something. So if you have donated, then you know, it could be that the tea and cake that we're eating is thanks to you. So that's really, really kind, and we did appreciate it. So anyway, on with today's part of the journey, and just a kind of a brief resume, as brief as I can make it, of what we've done so far. So we travelled from Durham up to Oban, and we took a couple of days over it and did some interesting things along the way. Then we got a ferry from Oban to the Isle of Mull and then to the Isle of Tiree. Then we returned to Oban and we drove all the way up to the Highlands and had a fantastic time at the Highland Games, and then drove back south and we travelled from a tiny little ferry terminal called Lochaline across to the Isle of Mull. And last time I showed you the map, I had Lochaline and Fishnish completely the wrong place, so it's now corrected. So this is actually where we crossed over onto Mull. And by this time we were feeling quite tired and we just wanted to find somewhere to rest for a bit before driving to our final destination of the day. We drove along the main road on the south side of Mull, passing by the ferry terminal at Craigmuir, where the ferries from Oban arrive, and where we'd originally been expecting to arrive, but then found that all the ferries were booked up. Seeing a sign to Duart Castle, we decided to drive along to take a look. Duart Castle has been the ancient seat of the MacLean clan for over 700 years. It actually fell into ruins from the 17th century, but renovations began over 100 years ago by one of the MacLeans, so that it's now a popular tourist destination. We didn't actually go into the castle on this occasion, but simply made use of the car park, which had a lovely view over the sea. We then continued on our way, heading for the Ross of Mull. That's the long, thin part of the island that lies in the southwest part of Mull. And we were planning to stay on a campsite near Fionnphort. That's how a local told me to pronounce it when I visited on a previous occasion, Fionnphort. The landscape was ever-changing and always stunning, even in the rather murky weather. Early on in our drive, we were delighted to pause for a little while to watch 3 deer. I think they're red deer, but feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. And they decided just to nibble on the grass right next to the road, and they didn't seem at all bothered by the vehicles. a short stop in Fionnphort to stretch our legs, we drove the last part of our journey to Fidden Farm campsite. They don't take advance bookings because they have such a large camping area that's never actually full. Arriving at reception, we booked to stay for a couple of nights, although we did in fact decide later to stay for a third night. We chose a spot that gave us a nice view onto the beach, but which we thought would also be a little bit sheltered. The site was reasonably busy, but everyone was quite well spaced. Once Phil had spent a little while helping a family who were having a bit of a struggle with their tent, we had a simple tea of pasta in a tomatoey sauce. We both woke up feeling in need of a slow recuperative day after all the travelling and excitement of the previous 3 days, and we ended up staying at Fidden Farm for the whole day. Staying in one place for an entire day is something that we rarely do. The only problem was that because there's no electric hookup on this site, our leisure battery did become a little low in charge by the evening. We enjoyed just looking out onto a beautiful view and reading and watching what other people were getting up to. I loved this vintage campervan that was parked near us for a while. I decided to spend some of my time drawing and chose our woolly companions as my subjects. Since we had lots of time to spare, I also decided that we would make blueberry pancakes for lunch. We brought some frozen blueberries and a pancake mix from home. After lunch, we decided to go and make use of the campsite facilities. So here you can see the main facilities. Inside the toilet block, which I always found to be nice and clean, there were also showers at no extra cost, and they did work okay, although I found the shower fitting to be a bit high up when I tried to alter the direction of the nozzle, so it's a slight problem. There was also a room with facilities for dishwashing and for washing and drying clothes, and just a comfy place to sit, especially for those people who were camping in very small tents, and I have been one of those people in the past. And there was a place where you could charge phones and other devices. There was a very nice quote on the wall too, which I won't be surprised if you've seen or heard before. In the centre of the campsite there were 2 extra toilets, which were surprisingly pleasant to use and much closer to where we'd parked than the main facilities. When the sun put in a brief appearance, we took a little stroll along the beach next to the campsite. It's lovely how the campsite hugs itself around the bay and is so easily accessible. There are areas of soft, mossy, sandy grass and easy rocks to climb over, as well as plenty of shells to collect. I had a bit of fun taking photos of Dapper Donkey collecting shells. And if you're thinking that these photos look a bit familiar, I did show them in one of my podcasts a little while ago. Someone on the beach did spot me taking photos, so I had a little chat with them about my knitted animals and how I love taking photos of them in different locations. We were soothed by the gently lapping waves, and we enjoyed watching other people having fun and making the most of their time by the sea too. Back at the van, we used some basic ingredients to make a very tasty Frankfurter risotto. Onions, courgettes, herbs, diced Frankfurter sausages and a packet of ready-cooked rice. And we went to bed feeling much rejuvenated from our slow, restful day. The next morning we were all ready for a more active day, and we were very happy to wake up to sunshine. Though it was quite windy all day and there were occasional very heavy showers, but the rain never stuck around for long. We headed away from the campsite and down the road to Fionnphort, where we'd already spotted a car park on the edge of the village, where parking was free, whereas nearer to the ferry terminal it's quite expensive to park for the whole day. Our plan was to visit the tiny island of Iona for the day, and there's a very short ferry crossing from Fionnphort. It's only essential vehicles that are allowed to cross on the ferry. Everyone else travels as a foot passenger. We had a lovely crossing to this island that we love and had been to before. In fact, I worked out that this was my 7th visit. The island has a very special atmosphere that I can't quite put my finger on. It just feels different to other islands. St. Columba came here in AD 563 and founded a monastery. I wonder if he felt that the island had a special atmosphere too. Iona is often known as the cradle of Christianity in Scotland, and it's the reason that many people want to come here. But many others come simply because it's such a peaceful place where you can escape from the outside world for a while. The ferry paused for a short while on the journey to give us a glimpse of a pod of dolphins swimming nearby, and although I wasn't quick enough to catch them on video, I did at least see them. We were soon stepping foot on the island, and our very first port of call was to the harbour cafe for tea and a scone. We wandered up through the only settlement on Iona. Iona has a population of about 170 permanent residents, and it has a primary school, a small number of shops, not just tourist shops, and cafes, a teeny tiny post office, it's really lovely, and a couple of hotels and some other accommodation. Wherever you look, there are beautiful views that always include the sea. Iona is only 1.5 miles wide by 3 miles long, and that's about 2.4 kilometres by 4.8 kilometres. We stopped by the ruins of the nunnery, a place that was founded at around the beginning of the 13th century and was in use for about 350 years. Most of the nuns were ladies from wealthy families, and they had an income from land belonging to the nunnery on Iona and also on Mull. They followed a strict daily timetable, but they didn't live a secluded life. Instead, they helped women who were less fortunate than themselves, so maybe illegitimate girls or women who might be leaving an estranged husband, and others who had been reduced to poverty for one reason or another. It was helpful to see the artist's impression of what the nunnery may have looked like. It definitely helps us to see more than just ruins while we wander around places like this. I saw a sign about the room which was the only one that provided warmth, and I tried to imagine what it would have been like to live here in the depths of winter. On the same site is a well-preserved medieval parish church called St. Ronan's, built at the same time as the nunnery and in use for a similar length of time. After that, we decided to take a walk to the northern end of the island. And we lingered quite a while on a beach called the White Strand of the Monks, so named because of a Viking raid towards the end of the 8th century when a large group of monks were massacred on this beach by the Vikings. It's such a peaceful and beautiful place that it's very hard to imagine this kind of slaughter taking place. While we were there, we did a bit of beach combing to see if we could find any of the sought-after Iona green marble. And I did manage to pick up 2 or 3 stones with a greenish tinge to them, so I was happy about that. We carried on walking around the northern coast for a while, quite blustered by a very strong wind, but enjoying the wide range of natural colours in the sea and the sky and the land. On the return walk, we came past another gorgeous beach called North Beach. The sun was fully out at this point, and the colours in the sea were just glorious, and it just felt great to be alive and in that incredible place. By then we were getting a bit peckish, so we called in at the St. Columba Hotel to have lunch. The hotel is such a wonderful location, and we had no complaint about the views. The food we had was, it was okay. I couldn't give it rave reviews, although it probably wouldn't stop us from returning in the future if we needed somewhere to eat. It was then time to go and visit Iona Abbey. The first monastery here was built during the 6th century when Columba arrived on the island along with his 12 companions, and they decided to settle on Iona and build a monastery. There's not much sign at all of the original monastery now, though this hillock here, called the Hill of the Abbot, is said to be where Columba had a little hut where he sat to do his writing. He wrote sacred books and composed hymns and poems. Remains of the base of the hut have been found in this location and dated to the time that St. Columba was alive. Soon after Columba died in AD 597, pilgrims started coming here to pay homage to St. Columba, whose fame had spread far and wide. They would pray to the relics of the saint, hoping for his blessing. The shrine of St. Columba, where the relics would have been kept, is thought to date back to the 9th or 10th century, though the roof of the building we see here was renovated in the 1950s. When the Viking raids first began, the relics of St. Columba were actually transferred away from Iona to Dunkeld in Perthshire and to Kells in Ireland. On their way from the landing place on Iona, pilgrims would have come across 4 crosses, where they would stop and pray on their way to the shrine. The one that we passed here was erected in the 15th century, and it's intricately carved. on one side with lacy designs sprouting from the tails of two beasts, and on the other a crucifixion scene. The oldest surviving cross dates to the 9th century, and that stands a bit closer to the abbey. St Martin's Cross is in incredible condition for its age, carved with serpents and scenes from the Bible. There are still signs of the route that pilgrims took to visit the shrine. It's known as the Street of the Dead. It would originally have been paved and went from where the boat landed to the abbey site, and it led the monks and pilgrims to the place of central importance on this site, the shrine of their saintly founder. Despite all the Viking attacks, the first monastery did manage to last until the end of the 12th century, and then in 1200 a Benedictine abbey was built on the same site as the original monastery, with a new abbey church to one side. When it was built in the 13th century, the abbey would have stood out in the landscape even more than it does today, because it would have been harled, and that means it had a thick white rendering on the outside walls. The economy of the abbey depended in part on the visits of pilgrims, so they wanted to make it easy to find. Today, it's no longer rendered, and the beautiful stonework can be appreciated, making us marvel at the skill of the stonemasons who built it. Next to the abbey is Iona's oldest intact structure, St Oran's Chapel, placed there in the 1100s by the MacDonald Lords of the Isles as a burial place for their family. It has a beautifully carved doorway, and it's surrounded by a graveyard which has continued to be used into modern times. Inside, the abbey was a peaceful haven from the wind. My favourite part of Iona Abbey is the Cloisters, and it's somewhere that I feel really at peace. Few of the original columns remained when the abbey fell into ruins, but they were replaced in the 1950s and 60s, and from the 1970s new carvings at the top of each column were gradually created over quite a number of years. On a previous visit to Iona, I'd been delighted to discover that some beautiful poetry had been written by somebody called Ewan about each individual carving, each showing a different plant, bird or biblical scene. And you can take these words as you slowly make your way from one column to the next and use them for a deeper reflection on the close connections between the abbey and the nature all around it, and ultimately with our own connections to nature and our deeper spiritual feelings. In 1938, the Iona community was founded by a church minister called George MacLeod, who came here from Glasgow with his wife Lorna to live and to rebuild the ruined accommodation at the abbey. People from all walks of life were welcomed here and continue to be welcomed today. It's a very inclusive community, continuing the work of the abbey and often transforming the lives of those who spend some time here. Before leaving the island, we had a little bit of time for shopping. I went to a little craft shop called Oran Creative Crafts, Crafts, which sells only handcrafted things that have been made on Iona. They have some beautiful things, and of course it would have been wrong of me not to have supported these local craftspeople, so I didn't come away empty-handed, and I'll try and remember to show you what I bought in another podcast. I was also excited to have spotted a new shop that hadn't been there on my last visit, the Iona Wool shop. It had a lovely selection of things made from fabric woven from Iona wool, as well as some ready knitted items, lots of hats, and a large selection of Iona wool. And again, there was no way I was going to be leaving the shop without making a little purchase or two. We had a little wait for the ferry to arrive to take us back across to Mull. Well, it's not too bad a place to be waiting in, really, especially as the sun was out. And I never get bored of just watching the waves and just appreciating being in a beautiful place. We boarded the ferry and got our last glimpses of Iona Abbey, which you can see standing out clearly on the horizon, even though the colours of the stone blend in with the landscape. Before returning to the campsite for a third night, we decided that it would be a good idea to go for a little drive, so we went as far as the village of Bunessan and back, and because it was our only way of recharging the van's leisure battery, I suppose we drove for, less than an hour. Then it worked perfectly, and we returned to the campsite with a fully charged battery. So that was good. And that's where I'm going to leave you for this week. Next time I return in the campervan, it'll be the last part of our trip to Scotland. So we finally got there. And I think I'm going to try and get that ready for next week. And we'll see what happens after that. Okay then. So until I see you again, take great care of yourself. Keep nice and busy. And I'll see you next time. Okay then. Bye.